Good afternoon, members, officers and any members of the public in the public gallery or viewing the live stream. Welcome to this extraordinary meeting of the Scrutiny and Overview Committee. My name is Councillor Graham Cohn and I am chairing this meeting. My Vice Chair is Councillor Stephen Drew, sitting to my left. I will introduce other attendees when I invite them to speak. Committee members, may I remind you that you should have before you the main agenda. Those in the chamber are reminded that the meeting is being live streamed. The normal procedure at Scrutiny and Overview Committee meetings is to review and make recommendations to Cabinet by affirmation. Only those members of the committee present in the chamber will be able to move and second motions or affirm. However, members present virtually may speak in the debate. May I ask those who are joining us remotely to ensure that their camera and microphone remain off unless they are addressing the committee. For those of us present in the room, please ensure your microphone is close to you and speak clearly when addressing the room. Finally, a report of this meeting will be presented to Council at the meeting on the 17th of July. So I just wanted to start on that point to say that I was disappointed as Chair of the Scrutiny Committee that the timescales of this meeting mean that the scrutiny has been delivered in the same week as the Council will see this report. I don't think it gives adequate time to make reasonable recommendations to that report, and I would have liked to have seen this meeting far earlier than we've seen it. But I think I've made myself clear, and I think my Vice Chair would also echo that. So I just wanted to say that at the beginning of the meeting. So we will move on to apologies for absence.
Yes, Chair, we have apologies from Councillor Earl and from Councillor R. Williams, but we have a substitute for Councillor Williams, Councillor Waters, and also apologies from Cabinet members John Batchelor and Peter MacDonald.
Okay, thanks very much for that. We'll move on to agenda item 3, which is declarations of interest. Does any member have a declaration of interest that they want to make clear at the beginning? Councillor Heather Williams.
Thank you. So I'm not on committee, but the agenda items come to committee as I requested it to come to scrutiny, so I thought best to be honest about that and advance.
Thank you for that. Any other declarations? If any become apparent during the meeting, please raise them as we go along. Okay. So then we come on to agenda item 4. And this is pages 3 to 372. This is the only substantive item on the agenda. Who would like to start?
I will start.
Lovely.
That's okay. Thank you. Yes, good. One of the things that we've obviously discussed beforehand is obviously that we are focused on specifically the contents of the report and the details in which the way the report is presented, and that we are seeking to have perhaps clarification and wider explanation of the contents of the report rather than anything else. And I want to start by going to page 8 and going to point 13. I note on many occasions, obviously, where the appendices are, that there is a very large amount of extremely helpful clarification regarding group size, regarding the movement of data and such like, and it's extremely helpful. But I note that at point 13, we are told that the number of applications for roles in the council that are advertised externally has increased by 123%. However, I was surprised to see that this wasn't contextualised in terms of, does this represent a significant increase compared to other councils? Is this a significant increase compared to what South Cambs has experienced before? So I was just wondering if there was any way in which it was possible to contextualise and clarify point 13 on page 8 of the report. How significant is a 123% increase in the number of applications for roles at the council that advertised externally during this period?
Thank you. Councillor Bridget Smith.
Thank you very much indeed. Okay, so it says the figures it gives you there are quite clear, but if I just give you some sort of anecdotal background. So prior to embarking on the study, we were at best filling 8 out of 10 advertised roles, and at many times, at times it was only 5 out of 10. And there were some jobs that we had been advertising, which I remember discussing at the, back in the very earliest stages, where we'd advertised for officers and had not one single applicant. So it wasn't even, and I think there was a case of advertising for ecology officers, which I think is a lovely job, trees and plants and hedges. And we had not one single applicant to the best of my recollection. So, it was a real problem. And again, anecdotally, but I will ask Councillor Williams to come in with some more hard data, if I may. It's particularly acute here. And I think probably all of us are aware how we've seen officers moving between our councils and the other councils in the Cambridge and Peterborough area. They work for Hunts, they work for City, they work for us. And that's not healthy. So we were seeing a high turnover of people as well. But we were, on top of which, we had some long-standing roles that we'd simply been unable to fill for extended periods of time. But if I could ask Councillor Williams to come in with some further detail, please.
Thank you, Chair.
Yeah.
Thank you, Chair. This relates to the quarterly reports that employment and staffing receive. Employment and staffing receive a report on recruitment and retention. And looking at those reports, you can see that, for example, 97 roles that were advertised since the beginning of 2025, only 2 had to be re-advertised. Now, if you go back before the trial started to the reports to that committee, you will see that that's a considerable improvement on what was happening pre-trial. So I do apologise that there's no direct reference to those reports in this report, but that's where the data has come from.
Okay, great, thank you. Yeah, that's all very clear, I think, in terms of the way you explain it. I suppose the bottom line of what I'm getting at in terms of scrutinising the report is that obviously the statement, which you have then explained, absolutely, of the number of applicants increasing by 123%, I just wonder whether it would have been helpful within the report for us to say, okay, the average increase in councils of our ilk was X%, or actually councils of our type had seen a decrease. So it's this thing for me of making sure that the statement has that wider context of South Cambs has achieved this or hasn't achieved this. It may well be that everyone else had a 300% increase, I somehow doubted, but it may well be. So that was all, that was kind of getting at. Thank you for your answer. And I just think that's kind of where we're looking this evening. Thank you.
So if I could just add, so I'm not sure that comparative data exists between councils. I'm kind of looking for any officer who might be able to confirm that. But this was internal information.
So I think the recommendation is to make it clearer within the report, I suppose.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah.
And also for me to accept I have asked for the earth there, and there is a limit to what can be provided.
Boiling the ocean.
Thank you very much.
Councillor, do you want to come in on this point, or
yes,
briefly?
on this specific point, I just want to say, I think that the comparison is really important. If we turn to page 218, it said about the question that says impact on hypothetical job application. It says on behalf of, would make them more likely to apply. It was a slender majority of 53%. So I think given that that response was so low, the contextual information that Councillor Drew was asking for would be very beneficial.
Agreed.
Bunty is your next one. Sorry.
Okay. Councillor, do you want to come in on this point? We'll pop you down. Councillor Bunty Waters.
Thank you, Chair.
That's right.
Still on page 8, number 13. I just wondered if we could have clarification. It says about the golden hellos. Should the 4-day week continue? Will the golden hellos continue?
Councillor Bridget Smith.
Thank you. We've stopped golden hellos. We don't need to use them anymore.
And I think the point was, would you continue with them at all, having implemented the 4-day working week policy? Is that what you're getting at, Bunty? Yeah.
So, so they are needs driven.
Yeah.
As things stand at the moment, we are not using them and have no intention of using them. I can't, bearing in mind this council isn't going to exist in a couple of years' time, I can't say what a future council
So
will
you're
be
not
doing.
ruling them out, but it's unlikely that they would be used because you haven't been using them
There's
during
not the need.
trial.
Why would we waste money on something that's not needed? We're getting huge numbers of applicants, and they're far higher calibre applicants than we've seen in the past, many of them.
Thank you. Councillor Bunty Waters, did you want to come back on that at all?
No, thank you.
Okay. Councillor Anna Bradman, next.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to thank the authors of this report for collating a great deal of quite complicated information into this very lengthy report. And I too would have wished for a little more time between this meeting and the council meeting, because I had some constructive suggestions for the report before it should go to council. So I'm going to say what they are so that you know what I would have asked for. So the first thing was on page 7, paragraph 9. So sandwiched in between paragraph 8, which is referring to the consultation in January to March this year here, and 10, which is regarding the financial impact of the 4-day week. We've seen a significant reduction in overspending on staff. Great, all that's about this council. And sandwiched in between is paragraph 9, which is actually, I think, talking about national data. So I just wanted a clarification that it's talking about national data, because it talks about the brief surge in satisfaction. So there's 2 elements to this. Firstly, it does relate to national data, doesn't it?
Let's take them one at a time. Councillor Bridget Smith.
So, firstly, my apologies. Before I said anything, I meant to apologise for the time frame. We spent some considerable time trying to work with diaries, and this was the best we could do, I'm afraid, and I know it's unsatisfactory. And thank you very much to all of the Scrutiny Committee for, accommodating something in such a short period of time. So my apologies for that. So yes, so as a board member of the LGA, we are presented with an annual report about national figures of residents' confidence in and satisfaction in local government. I've been a board member for the last 3, this is my 3rd year, and there's been an 8% downturn in that period alone. And what's in item 9 here shows that actually that's been a 16% downturn since 2012, albeit it peaked during COVID when, the role of local government was very much highlighted in a very positive way. But there, we've seen national confidence in central government, local government, only going down in late. And this is a national trend which needs obviously reversing.
Yeah. So these points I'm making are about the formatting of the report. So all I was going to say is my understanding was that was about national data. And I think it should have been flagged just a bit more clearly that this was national data, and that in comparison our data looks slightly different. So that was the point there.
Okay, thank you.
The second one is in the naming, not the naming of parts, but the naming of surveys. Because on page 17, we have a summary at paragraph 61 of the 3 consultation surveys that were done. Now, I don't know quite why, but they've all ended up with very similar names. And so what we've got is the statistically valid resident and business survey, which is where the surveyors contacted 1,400 people by phone. So they obviously contacted more than that, but actually got 1,400 responses split between residents and businesses. Fine. But elsewhere, this is then described as the survey. So that's the confusingly called the representative survey report at appendix C. And then there's page 18, that's described there. And then the best value representative survey is the stakeholder survey that we are obliged to engage in with stakeholders. And that's confusing because it's called representatives. And actually it's our stakeholder survey, and that's the one that we can find on page 278 of our agenda pack. But it's confusing. And then there's the open survey, which is the results of which are given at page 221. So I just think it would have been helpful to have 2 things. Named them clearly and stuck to the same consistent naming throughout, because otherwise it's very confusing, and I actually had to ask officers to clarify. Secondly, it would have been helpful if the best value representative survey had been separated out as a separate report from, it's actually immediately after the open survey, and so I felt that was quite confusing, and I would have liked that to be separated out.
So the recommendation is to have those tally, essentially?
Yes, so the naming and of the reports to be consistent throughout.
Okay.
And a simpler naming that wasn't so duplicative. You know, there's reference to representatives in both of them. I can explain that later if that's easier.
Let's take that point first, and then I'll come back to you, Councillor Bradnam. So can we get consistency throughout the report in terms of Councillor Bridget Smith? Oh, yeah, Councillor Williams.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. First of all, take the best value survey. That is the title of the best value survey. So the best value, we are expected under the best value notice to identify the representatives and the views of the representatives of those who receive our services, pay our tax, etc. So the best value representative survey is there because that is, as the report explains, is something that we have to do. On the other 2 surveys, obviously there's the open survey, and I think that's quite obvious what that is. On the representative survey, I think the confusion has arisen because in some places, quite rightly, we talk about it as being a statistically representative survey, and maybe that should have been more obvious when we come to identify that particular survey. But that survey is quite important because unlike the open survey, which is self-selecting, the representative survey actually gives us a look at what the various parts of our district think about this in a more systematic way, and statistical way. So perhaps we should have described it rather better than just calling it a representative survey, because that could have been confused with the best value representative survey.
So I think the recommendation is to change that.
Yeah, I think the point being, in the actual detailed reports, the best value survey is called the best value stakeholder survey. And I think it would have been helpful, because then you understand that these are not necessarily, as I understand it, individuals. This is organisations you are contacting for a response. Like, for example, if I may give you some examples, Citizens Advice Bureau, Dial-A-Ride, a federation of small businesses. So I think it would be helpful if that was referred to as it is in the title on page 278.
Okay.
Thank-
Councillor Bridges.
Thank you. I think the problem is some of us have read this report so many times, you end up not, finding it difficult to see that. So thank you very much for pointing those out. We will take that away, and we will have a look at how we can make it clearer, which one we're talking about at any time. So thank you very much.
Okay, and the third item, if I may, Chair, this is for the time being. This is my formatting and clarity bit. My attention was drawn to the same item that Councillor Waters was, because in the pay policy at Agenda A, on page 39 at paragraph 2.1, we have, and you've said, Leader, that we're not going to use golden hellos, and yet part 2 of this pay policy, which is proposed update for July 2025, it refers to 2.1, market factor supplements, retention payments, and golden hellos. And my question was, I thought we didn't need to use these anymore. So I'm not quite sure whether this actually is the correct version of the revised pay policy.
So,
because I didn't think...
What I had understood from the Leader that would remain in place in case we needed to use it, and that's why it's still in the report. Am I right, Leader?
Yeah, yes. So, but we're not using golden hellos anymore, for the time being. But we're not tying the hands of any future administration here. And we have to acknowledge that other problems may arise. And local government reorganisation is one of those problems that has, which has caused huge uncertainty amongst public service staff. And I think probably, hopefully not our staff, but elsewhere, people are suffering from great job uncertainty. So, we can't predict the market at the moment because there's so much uncertainty there.
The point being, it's not coming out of the pay policy in case it's needed at a later date.
Councillor Williams, just one.
Yeah, just to make it clear that we will continue to have a golden hello retention policy. We're not intending to remove that policy.
I think that's clear.
Okay, but we're not going to use it. Okay.
Thank you. Councillor Leeming, please.
Thank you, Chair. We've been presented with a lot of data in this report, surveys, reports, KPI measurements, things that measure how and whether the 4-day week works. On page 13, there is a review of it's a regression analysis of the KPIs, which shows that 42% of the KPIs improved, 58% stayed the same. There's also a variance there depending on whether or not you take into account the impact of COVID. But under either analysis, broadly speaking, some things have improved and most things have stayed the same. Although this is implied in various parts of the report, particularly in the health and wellbeing sections, I keep coming back to the question, not how or what we can measure about the 4-day week, but why? Why have we been able to maintain these KPIs? Why, I would like somebody in Cabinet and possibly the Chief Executive to expand on why the Council has been able to either improve or maintain their KPIs. What has changed in how people are working to enable this efficiency?
And am I to understand from that you would like to see more of that information in the report, Councillor Lehman?
Yes, I don't think that's explicit enough in the report. There's a lot of measuring, but I think it's missing some information on why it works.
So the recommendation is you want more of the why.
Yes, I wondered whether,
Thank you.
whilst we're here, the Cabinet and the Chief Executive could expand on why they think it works.
Councillor Bridget Smith.
So, thank you, and it's a really excellent question, and thank you for suggesting that Liz Watts, responds to this in the first instance, and if there's anything else, then myself and John Williams will come in here. But I think she's probably best placed to, explain the why, because she's closest to all the staff.
Liz Watts.
Thank you, and through you, Chair. I think all of my colleagues could probably answer this question because they all work with large teams, and I think everyone would probably say that. You can see it in the data, in the health and wellbeing data. You can see it in motivation and intention to stay, and feeling valued at the council, and those things are sort of symbiotic. But people have reported because they feel valued by the council, they feel more motivated and have more intention to stay or intention to stay longer. And I guess it's sort of basic social exchange theory, really. We're kind of providing a really significant benefit for colleagues, and what we are seeing in return is that colleagues are putting in the extra effort to make sure that things like KPIs, we do maintain or improve our performance. So that would be my explanation. I'm quite sure that all of my colleagues would like to weigh in if they could, but I'm conscious of time.
Thank you for that. So I suppose the question, just to come back on that, Liz, is could we have more of that in the report? I think Councillor Lehman is alluding to. Do you think there's place for more of that in the report?
We're certainly able to put more of it in. I think we'll need to have a discussion at the end about whether you want to have a summary scrutiny report that identifies the things that you've highlighted here, or how else you want to address that. It may be that if we change the report now, for those people who have read it, things, they may not notice the changes. So we could highlight those through the summary report, but obviously that's entirely up to you, Chair. So
that would be my understanding, that any recommendations from this committee are given to members prior, or tomorrow, prior to full council, so they've got sight on the recommendations made. And Simon will be keeping a list of the recommendations for Cabinet to decide whether they want to take those up or not, as the case may be. Thank you. Councillor Lehman.
Thank you. I'm just wondering whether there are any specific examples that could be given of things that have changed. If there was something that was a sort of bottleneck or a sort of long-running issue. We've already spoken about recruitment and that improving. And I guess with that, there's also the retention aspect, which means there's less new staff to train, and the sort of churn and time that's involved in bringing new staff up to speed. But I wonder if there were any particular examples that could be given of something that that the 4-day week resolved.
And then could they be added to the report, yes, essentially? Councillor John Williams.
Thank you, Chair. Can I say this is a very good point that Councillor Lehman is making, because the 4-day week is more than just the physical process of changing people's working patterns. It's actually changing the culture of the organisation, and the culture is changed because people feel that they're more listened to. It's an inclusive organisation, and therefore, by asking them how they are able to work more productively, they feel that they are part of the organisation and bringing about the 4-day week solution. So it's a really good point. The difficulty is how do you capture that?
Yeah,
there's a lot of anecdotal evidence, but how do you actually capture that? We will go away and look at that.
And I think the recommendation that Councillor Lehman is making is that, like you, she wants to see more of that in the report. I accept that might be difficult, but I think the recommendation from this committee is that you go away and have a look at that prior to full council. Agreed?
Yes,
Lovely. And I think that's been noted. Councillor Bridget Smith.
Thank you. I wonder if we could just ask Jeff Membry to add some detail, and then I might just mop up with any other bits that, would that be okay, Chair?
I think it will be very briefly, because I think the point has been made by Councillor Lehman as to what she wants to see additionally.
Perhaps just one example. The contact centre is a really good example. Exactly as Councillor John Williams said, actually what we did was get them involved in how they were working, looking at the calls that were coming in, talking to them about how they could best space out the resource to make sure that we had the right number of people on when we expected to get the right type of calls. Working with our colleagues in revenues and benefits, for example, to work out when during the year they were going to be sending out texts reminding people to pay, when they were going to be doing summons runs and reminder runs, planning around that, getting the whole organisation involved in looking to deliver at a high level. You're also absolutely right that corporately, if when somebody leaves, when an experienced member of staff leaves, normally you lose productivity while they're working out their notice, you lose productivity while managers and HR are planning for interviews and undertaking them. You have a gap often when there's nobody doing the job and you have to get an agency person in that doesn't know as much.
Jeff, I think we understand those points.
Sorry, I'm enthusiastic, Chair, I apologise.
Thank you for that. I think Councillor Lehman was saying that really what she wanted to see in the report was like John Williams was saying, she wanted to see that mentioned in the report. So we could talk over it all night, but it's can we add that to the report? Okay, we'll move on. So Councillor Bygott.
Thank you, Chairman. So I've got two small questions related to things that my colleagues have said, but then I'd like my main questions to be on the surveys.
Okay.
If I can ask those separately.
Let's do questions. We'll take them one at a time.
Okay, fantastic.
Yeah.
So further to Councillor Waters' question about golden hellos, and we had from the leader a policy statement that we weren't going to give golden hellos. Does that also apply to market supplements? Are we not going to give those, even if they stay in the policy?
Councillor John Williams.
With market supplements, because they go with the person, so they would have already, so we can't stop them. But obviously, we need to look very carefully at whether or not for certain positions, particularly in planning, we still need to require them, because we are in a very competitive market, and we're up against, for example, metropolitan authorities that offer, take, for example, London Waiting. So, we have to be mindful of that sort of thing. But so far as golden hellos is concerned, we don't intend to use that policy anymore, and it may well be that we're able to phase out, market as well, but we need to see that over time.
Councillor Tom Bygott.
Just on that point, does that apply to them being reviewed, as we normally review them?
Councillor John
Williams. No, you can't take them away that we've already given them to people. There are, they have the right to have that for the period that it's been agreed with them. But clearly we will be reviewing whether or not we need to use it as widely as we have done so far. But as I say, there will probably always be occasions when we do need to use that in order to attract people of very high calibre away from other authorities that are able to offer higher salaries than us. For example, at London boroughs where there is a London Waiting.
Councillor Bygott.
So thank you very much for that. So my next question was further on from what Councillor Bradnam mentioned about the best value stakeholders survey. And one of the things that she mentioned was that the stakeholders are people like Citizens Advice and various other organisations, and that I believe there were 400 stakeholders. But what she said is that there's a limit to how many of such stakeholders exist. So my question is really that on page 57 of Appendix D, apologies, I'm actually using the agenda for Thursday. but I'm assuming that the appendices are the same rather than the total numbers. In section 4.1.1, it lists who the best value stakeholders are, and it starts off by saying representatives of persons liable to pay tax, representatives of persons liable to pay business rates, representatives of persons who use services, and representative of persons appearing to the authority to have an interest. That definition is much wider than those public bodies. People who pay tax include all their residents, and people who pay business rates includes all of our businesses. So to what extent is the people in this survey different from the residents and businesses who took part in the representative survey?
Okay.
If the two definitions overlap.
Yeah. Okay. Councillor John Williams.
Well, the best value survey is the criteria for that is set for us, okay, and we are therefore to ensure that we have done that survey correctly, we have to follow what is prescribed to us, and it's very difficult. I appreciate that you know, there are a great many stakeholders that are involved in particular aspects of the criteria laid down for the best value survey. But the reason it differs from the representative survey is that we have to demonstrate to government that we have taken best value into account. We have to follow their guidance on the best value representative survey. But when it comes to our own representative survey, of course, we're looking at a different set of dynamics. We're looking at a different set of, we're looking at the socio-economic set of statistics for the district. And some of those organisations would have been interviewed twice, and some not, because they are two separate surveys.
Councillor Bridget Smith.
Thank you. Just to add to that, so I believe a paper came to you in January, which discussed, you know, where you were able to discuss who were going to be those stakeholders. So that was the paper that came in January.
Scrutiny.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. And actually, it was quite broad, as has been said. People liable to pay tax, such as Citizens Advice Age UK. There was quite a long list of third sector bodies there. Then people likely to pay business rates, such as Federation of Small Business, Chamber of Commerce and Cambridgeshire Head, and then representatives from people who use services such as Housing Tenants Participation Group, and then representative persons appearing to the authority to have an interest, such as 3Cs and the other councils. So it was a selected group of people who are likely to have an interest and be likely to respond. So it did come before this committee. So you had seen it, and I don't believe had raised objections to that list when you saw this in January.
Councillor Bygott. Anna Bradham, is it on this point or? Yeah, let's let Councillor. Sorry. Okay. Right.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Councillor Bygott. I think in this case, the wording, and if I just read one of them, representative of persons liable to pay tax. I think in this case, that perhaps has the legal sense, you know, an entity, not just an individual person, which I think is what perhaps you'd originally thought. But
Councillor.
Because I'd asked the same question as what was the difference between this and the representative survey.
Okay, Councillor Bygott.
Just to clarify that point, so what we're saying is that representatives of persons liable to pay tax doesn't include residents who pay council tax, and representatives of persons liable to pay business rates doesn't include ordinary businesses.
Councillor Bridget Smith.
Thank you. We're all tired, aren't we? Could I ask Gareth if he just sort of pick that up? Because, as I say, there was the open survey where absolutely anybody and everybody could participate. But if Gareth could just perhaps tell you the sort of legality of it.
Thank you for that, Gareth.
Thanks, Chair. Through you.
So I think members have discussed the point really here is it's the representative persons. So this isn't all of our residents. The open survey gives everybody that opportunity. Here it's a statutory process where we have to identify those groups. So for example, the Federation of Small Businesses would be a representative group of small businesses rather than us going to all small businesses. That's where the open survey and the representative survey comes in. So I hope that clarifies that, Chair.
Councillor Bygott.
Thank you very much. So I just wonder if we could, in the beginning of section 4, just say that explicitly, because it it is a little bit misleading the way it's written. So that would be one recommendation I have.
Yeah, and I would support that. Yeah, to make that clearer. Yeah. Councillor John Williams.
Yeah, can I just make the point that actually went beyond the basic that we were asked to do by government. Yeah. You know, we went beyond just the best value.
And I think that's been recognised, but it's not clear from the report. So I think what Councillor Bygott is saying it should be. Councillor Bygott.
Thank you very much. So, yeah, if I could ask my main questions now, and they're really to do with the 3 surveys. And I noticed, so if you look on Appendix C, page 10, for example, there are, from the statisticians, numerous warnings. Caution, low base size, less than 30. Caution, very low base size, less than 20. Caution, extremely low base size, less than 10. And if you actually look at those tables, another table of a similar nature is on page 47 of Appendix C, and there's another one on page 58, Appendix D, and on page 12 of Appendix D. And so in addition to those warnings from the statistician, there are numerous parts of those tables that say no statistically significant difference. Now, one of the things that, the principal thing that we're trying to do here is we're trying to say, is the satisfaction with our services the same before and after? Has the satisfaction improved, or has the satisfaction decreased? Now, we should say whether these are one-tailed or two-tailed tests. Because there have been no statistically significant increases, once you saw that, you would see that, well, that's a two-tailed test. But in fact, every single one of these either says no statistically significant difference, statistically significant decrease, or NA through lack of data. And the main problem as I see it is that no statistically significant difference covers 2 things. Either there is actually no change in the satisfaction to that service, which is one of the things we hope to see, that service levels have stayed steady. But it also includes the possibility that there's not enough data. So essentially, there being no statistically significant difference is the product of 2 things. One is the effect size that you're trying to measure. So was on average there a large decrease, or was there a very small decrease? So that's the effect size. But then the number of samples goes into that as well. So if we don't have enough samples, then we're likely to get the answer no statistically significant difference, even though there is a decline, because the decline is not large enough for that number of samples. And so what that means is that if we don't have enough responses in these categories, we're going to get an answer which we can't distinguish from there being no change. And that makes it really, really important to have enough survey responses. So my question is, how did we arrive at 1,000? So for the representative survey, because I think it's more important in the representative survey than it is in the open survey, because we set the number of responses and we actively sought particular individuals. So how did we arrive at those numbers? Did we consider that asking 1,000 people and 400 businesses overall would result in enough people having a view on particular services. So it's kind of a rule of thumb in a lot of areas of statistics that you need about 50. You can calculate how many you need in advance, but generally speaking, as a very rough guide, 50 is what you need for things not to have a problem. But in a lot of cases, we've got less than 30, less than 20, and less than 10. Did we, at any point, say those numbers are not enough? Did we ask the question, should we ask more people in order to get enough answers? And do we consider it sufficient for this council to make a decision where we can't really say whether there was a statistically significant decrease or not through lack of data? So is this council happy to make a decision where it's quite clear to me that we don't actually have enough data to make that decision? Thank you.
Thank you for that, Councillor Bygott. Do you want to start, Councillor Bridget Smith?
Thank you. So, and if my colleagues would fill in anything I miss. Okay, so there was actually quite a lot of questions there. It wasn't just one question. So I'm very familiar with Wilcoxon 1 and 2 tail tests because I used them for my own thesis. This refers to the Wilcoxon signed rank test, and it says this statistical analysis is not simply measured and comparing the overall mean. The Wilcoxon signed rank test is a method used to assess whether there's a significant difference between two related sets of observations, in this case perceptions of council service before and after January 2023. So, you know, we are relying on experts from 3 universities to identify what the best statistical analysis is. So I have every confidence that that was the correct one used. They are perfectly clear that where the sample is too small, they have made no judgment on it, and that's quite obvious in the report, where where they have not commented on ones where the sample is too small, and that's detailed by asterisks. One where they're just small, and others where they are, you know, very, very small. We can't make people respond to stuff. Generally speaking, you know, people reply to consultations because, you know, they've got an interest in it. I think we had, was it as far as the whole population of South Cambridgeshire and Cambridge City, was it 0.3% of the population? So 0.3% of the population was motivated to participate in this very, very widely publicised consultation. So, you know, people weren't interested, but we still value the responses we have had. So, in relation to the statistically valid resident business survey, having 1,000 specially selected people balanced for, and all the things they're balanced for are listed in the paper: age, racial qualities, sex, and so and education, and so on. That's the industry standard, and that's what all the political pollsters use. They use 1,000. So, you know, we were going with you know, the market standard there. So again, it is, you know, that's the best advice to do, and that's given us statistically valid results. So you cannot say, I'm afraid, that where it says there is either no improvement or there's a decrease or there is an improvement, that, you know, the sample size has been a factor, because there's been a robust statistical analysis independently done by experts and who've only drawn those conclusions where the numbers are sufficient. Gareth, may I ask if Gareth might like to add anything?
I think you've explained
that all right?
the point. Councillor Bygott. Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah. So, well, I'm pleased to see that statisticians did choose the Wilcoxon signed rank test as opposed to using a paired t-test, which would have been would require a normality assumption. So I think that aspect of the statistical analysis I'm very pleased with. And I think the 1,000 is not really the issue here. Yes, pollsters do use 1,000, but then all of those 1,000 say, you know, which party they're going to vote for or what the question is. In this case, we've got 1,000 people, but fewer than 30 people have answered a particular question. And actually what's important is how many people say they're going to answer the question on bin collection services, how many people say they're going to answer the question on licensing service. And it's really the number of people who are answering each of those questions, because it's those people on which we determine whether that particular service has gotten better, stayed the same, or decreased. So it's not the 1,000, it's the fact that the 1,000 only generates 20 responses on a particular service.
So, Tom, are you asking that that should be explicit against each thing?
Well, I think it would be helpful if we actually had listed down how many people answered those questions. I think that would be quite useful. But you know, my main question is, do we think that these are enough responses to make our decision on?
Thank you. Councillor Bridget Smith.
Okay, so we've fulfilled our legal responsibility. We have some useful information, and you know, the feedback that we've had from all three of these groups, we will be acting on. That where it's appropriate to act on it. I will take back about whether it's possible. You know, Gareth obviously will take back about whether it's possible to give you more granular information there. I don't know whether that's possible or not, but yeah, so we'll take that back and see whether it is. But at the end of the day, you know, this is robust. We employed an expert company to do it for us and to advise us, and this took a considerable amount of time and planning to get right and to be robust. So I have every confidence that we've done this in a correct and proper way, and we have got results that are, you know, kind of as good as we can get. So.
I think it's been clarified. Have you got a point of information on this point, Councillor Heather Williams?
It's on the previous point, Chair, in relation to market supplements. And the answer that Councillor John Williams gave. So I'm looking at, on our website, at the market supplement policy, where it talks about the review. And it says on there that market supplement payments are subject to periodical review when a vacancy occurs, or at least every 2 years. It goes on to say, following the review of the decision to grant market supplements to a post, all employees on the designated post will be notified of either continuation, variation, or cessation of the market supplement. It was referred to earlier that if people are on a market supplement and they're already employed on that basis, can't be taken away, was my understanding of what Councillor John Williams said. Now, perhaps we have an old policy on the website, or something might have changed, but that is our current policy on the website, so I think this needs clarifying as to whether market supplements are reviewed every 2 years or not, and whether they will be potentially removed from existing contracts.
Yeah, I think Councillor Williams can take that away, and
Jeff Bembry can probably answer it now. We don't know the answer.
Briefly,
Jeff probably does.
Yes, they are reviewed. I think Councillor John Williams was talking about you can't take them away during that period, but there's a set period. At the end of that period, they're reviewed. And we have recently taken some market factor supplements away from people on review. So it can happen.
Thank you for that clarification. Councillor Heather Williams.
Thank you, Chair. In that case, could I just ask, with that in mind, it was said earlier, the response was we can't take market supplements away. So having heard that advice from officers, will Cabinet at review take away market supplements?
No, it's not. You know, that's completely operational matter. Liz is the head of paid service. It's not our responsibility.
Liz Watts.
Thank you, and through you, Chair. We certainly hope to be able to continue to do regular reviews, and you know, I think if the 4-day week were to become permanent, I would see very, very few roles, if anywhere, we'd be needing to pay them. But obviously, you know, I don't want to say categorically we will never pay them again, because as Councillor Smith has said, things change. But it's certainly our intention, you know, should the decision be made on Thursday to become permanent, for that to be one of the first steps that we'll take.
Thank you for that clarification. Councillor Heather Williams.
So I'm just wondering, when we've had things come back from staff about their sort of appeal of the 4-day week, etc., have staff been consulted in a way that makes clear that this may put their market supplement at risk?
Liz Watts.
So market supplement is always conditional upon market factors, and a market factor in this context would be a change to become a permanent 4-day week employer.
Thank you. Let's move on. Councillor Bygott, had you finished your points? I think we'll come back to you if you've got any more. Councillor James Howbray.
Thank you, Chair. So, first of all, I'd like to reiterate my thanks to everyone involved in putting these reports together, because it's an enormously comprehensive set of reports, and gives us, it arms us with a huge amount of information, and will really help for the decisions we have to make later this week. So the reports clearly have a strong narrative of a success story about service delivery, especially for the planning department. And a great deal of that narrative relies on the key performance indicators that we monitor regularly in this committee, the KPIs. So I have two questions, if that's okay. My first question is really...
one by one. Yeah, we'll do them one by one. Yeah.
My first question is about the spread of those KPIs. So I suppose I'd like to first of all focus in on the KPIs that have shown spectacular improvement. So we have 3 KPIs for planning that have shown huge improvement in the last 2 years. So the average time to determine validated household planning applications in the last 2 years has gone down from about 10 weeks to just over 7 weeks. The percentage of major applications determined within 3 weeks or the agreed timeline, that's gone up from 65% to about 97%. And the percentage of non-major applications determined within 8 weeks or the agreed timeline has gone up from 70% to 95%. So these are all really impressive increases. They're all about the timeliness of delivery. So that brings me to my question, really. I mean, this combined with the move away from the unwanted dependence on temporary staff, it suggests that this is all a win-win. But there is always the potential for a trade-off between timely delivery and quality of work. Now, ideally, we'd like to have as many KPIs that monitor the quality of work as we have that monitor timely delivery. And I acknowledge that there are some KPIs that monitor quality of work, and so a couple of them, they monitor the number of applications that succeed on appeal, for example, and that's a quality of work metric. But I think it's fair to say overall that the KPIs tend to be weighted towards timely service delivery more than quality of work measurement. So this is my question. So alongside the work in tracking these KPIs, what work has been done during the trial and what work will be done going ahead to look at, to ensure that the focus on service quality remains strong, and that we're fostering a culture that maintains that high service quality and not in any way falling into that problem of the trade-off between service quality and timely delivery. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor James Howbray. Councillor Bridget Smith.
Thank you. So that's a really very valuable question, because, it's a bit like when you think of the NHS Councillor Cone. It's all very well that people are triaged within 10 minutes, but actually when they're there, for 24 hours waiting to be seen, you're hitting a target, but actually you're not delivering a service. But fortunately we do have some KPIs that measure quality, and in relation to planning, that is the overturning of planning decisions. So I gather from the table here, we have a number of KPIs which are meeting the target value 100% of the time during the trials, and that includes PN 515, which is major planning applications decisions which are overturned, and non-major planning application decisions that are overturned. So actually there's evidence here but as well as seeing a really significant increase in the number of applications, which domestic applications in particular, which are dealt with within the requisite time. I think it was 75% before the trial, and it's now 95%. But we're also seeing a huge improvement in the quality of that decision making. And all credit there obviously goes to our staff, obviously the planning committee as well, who don't deal with a whole lot, but actually deal with the really tricky ones. But, you know, the planning committee is advised and guided by our staff, and we have these highly skilled, well-motivated, committed members of staff, you know, all of whom are now, the vast majority of whom are permanent members of staff. They're not agency staff coming and going. They're people who've been here for a while and intend to stay. So a huge amount of institutional knowledge there as well. So I am very reassured that the quality of what we're doing is increasing, as well as the speed and the efficiency with which you're doing it. I don't know if any of my colleagues want to add any other examples to that.
Just briefly, I think we've got the gist there. Yeah.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Can I just refer members to page 121, which has two charts which show major plan application decisions, percentage overturned, and you'd see that before the and during the early start of the trial, that was going up, but actually since the end of 2023, it's been going down. And I think that's an indication of how consistency in the planning service is now working through to its quality of delivery.
Councillor James Howbrow.
So thank you for the answers. We do certainly have KPIs that measure quality as well as the KPIs that measure quantity. I think I was looking for something a little above and beyond that in the sense that I think there are some things that are quite difficult to measure with KPIs, and that we need to be keeping an eye on aspects of quality that are hard to pin down with KPIs. And I'm hoping that we do also have mechanisms in place that allow us to monitor those qualitative aspects that can't readily be captured in KPIs.
So in a recommendation, you want to see more of what Councillor Williams was alluding to in his response?
I think perhaps, and some comment on this issue, because I think it's easy for it to get lost when we see a long list of KPIs.
Okay, so I think that's been noted as a recommendation. Councillor Williams, do you want to just very briefly come in on this point?
I'd just like to clarify, I heard something Councillor Smith said correctly. It was in relation to overturns. You said that sort of 100% of appeals have been won. I'm guessing that was an error, or I misheard, because obviously the planning committee member, I know that's not quite true.
Well, the table I was reading, the data I was reading from is in, golly, is it page? It was, sorry, can you say, it was 100% of the time it was above target, sorry.
Yeah.
100% of the time it was above target.
The clarification.
So, yeah, I'm sorry about that.
Okay. Yeah.
I am overwhelmed. Sorry, Chair, may Stephen Kelly just add, sorry, he's probably going to clarify my misspeaking on that.
That's okay. I think you've clarified it, but just very briefly.
For the table show.
Well, just very briefly, just to provide some reassurance, it's difficult to kind of quantify in PIs, but we do have a much deeper engagement with both the development community through the Agents Forum, through parish councils, through regular training, and through the kind of what you might call the larger scale business interest through regular meetings with the forum.
Okay.
We can't easily capture that. We can come back to you probably with the number of times we're meeting, but we haven't got any historical data on those records.
So I think Councillor Howbrow was suggesting that reference should be made to that in relation to the quality side of things in the report, and I think that's what the recommendation is gearing towards. Councillor Howbrow, did you have anything else?
Thank you. May I ask a follow-up? Thank you. So, I mean, the story on KPIs is pretty decisive and pretty impressive. Later on in the report, we have a lot of data on engagement surveys with residents, with business users, and this doesn't show the same pattern that we're seeing in our KPIs. So really, I wondered if we could have some kind of overview of why we're seeing two slightly different stories here, and what we feel the possible explanations for that might be.
Councillor Bridget Smith.
Thank you. So this goes back to the point that Councillor Bradnam highlighted about the LGA national data on, satisfaction with local government. So we've seen that's showed significant downturn, 8% downturn in the last 3 years. Obviously, we are seeing inconsistencies between what the survey shows and what the statistical analysis of our KPIs shows. But that doesn't mean that we can discount what people have said to us. And if people's perception is that there hasn't been improvement when actually all our data shows quite categorically there has been improvement, or it shows that there's been a downturn in their satisfaction with our service when actually we know our services have maintained or they're improved, we've got to look at why people's perception is thus when it conflicts with the actual hard data. Now, I think you have to factor in that we are currently living in a world where trust in national and local government is poor and getting poorer, and you have to look at these things in that context. But still, we need to, there is some serious work for us to do in understanding why people are less happy than we think they should be, and whether that's a matter of us improving our communications, whether, I think we need to talk more to people to find out how we can provide that reassurance that actually our surveys are good. And if you look at the mystery shopper exercise we did with the contact centre, the one that's just been done shows that we've maintained this extraordinarily high satisfaction level in a mystery shopper, which I think was 400 calls, wasn't it? And incredibly high, way exceeded what is the kind of national average. And yet people are saying, they're dissatisfied with the contact centre, and yet when we do a mystery shopper exercise, it shows the absolute opposite. So, perhaps we need to be using things like our magazine, other communication channels, just to try and communicate the good news more effectively with people and start restoring people's confidence in local government, which, was very, very high during COVID, and very disappointingly, I think because of a myriad number of factors way outside of our control, has plummeted nationally.
Councillor Howbrow.
Okay. So thank you. I mean, that all makes good sense to me. It might be good to have some comments along these lines at some point in the report, because I felt that the two halves of the report seemed a little disjointed from one another, but I realise there's not much time for that.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Councillor Richard Stobart.
Chair, thank you very much. So we've talked about KPIs, and we've talked about the, if you will, the softer side of how the process of running the 4-day working week has been achieved. So I think the KPIs give us the big picture, and the KPIs say the council works as well, if not better, as a result of the change. But the softer stories, the details of how people have changed their working styles, how they worked in teams and so on, seems a little quiet in the report. And I think some of those anecdotes, alongside some harder numbers, gives us some important clues. So Councillor Leaming asked the question quite legitimately, what has actually happened? But I happened in the reading of this to alight on Appendix G, which is a lovely piece of work, which was really focused at people with disabilities, medical conditions, and were informal carers. We would expect that group to feel the kind of things the whole workforce feel, but a little more acutely. And the kind of things that are talked about are summarised in this series of almost personal reflections. So I just quote from page 366, the middle, colleague from finance, who says, "We needed to change how we organise meetings. This is a council-wide change. Meetings are now shorter, 30 to 45 minutes, or shorter if possible. Only the people that need to be there attend, so we have less meetings." And I think that kind of sums it up. You know, if we as outsiders looked at how the council was working, we'd say, yeah, let's shorten the meetings. But here is an account from somebody who's been part of that process. So I would say, yeah, we've got the big report and we've got the excellent statistics, but let's draw out some of these stories and make them kind of work and live alongside the numbers. I have to say, you know, for me as a technical person, I've looked at those two very numerical reports, very well executed, and I think we've heard the tributes paid. I think to kind of make it all work a little better, it would be great to have a timeline. I mean, we get a little confused, don't we, about what happened when, but a simple graphic which laid out the events would be really helpful. And if we could, to underline some of these anecdotes, so don't just have them shuffled off into Appendix G, but really highlight them, because if they were interspersed with the numbers, I think the whole 4-day week initiative comes to life. Now, I just have one question, and I hope it's a small and easy one. Could we maybe, in a small addition to the report, summarise the culture we've created?
Councillor Bridget Smith.
Okay, that sounds like a Tolstoy novel, actually, not a short paragraph. So if I just a lot of the points that the committee's been making has, you know, been about sort of value judgments, and I think we've been very mindful that the cover report of this needs to be about hard facts and evidence. And I'm fascinated that you're asking us to put value judgments into the report, really, because I would like to from the outset, but I was advised that no, this needs to be a very factual, you know, evidence-based report.
Stick to your guns, leader.
Hard data and so on. No, I was follow wise advice, because actually, if it had been full of value judgments, then I'm sure members of the committee would have said that it was a less valuable report because it was, you know, it was doing just that. So I'm fascinated that actually that's what you're asking for. But we'll have to think about how we incorporate that in some ways. So I found that very encouraging, actually. You know, there has been some lovely supplementary work done on, you know, the particular value of the 4-day week to people with disabilities. And I think was it caring responsibilities as well? So people with disabilities and caring responsibilities. So I'm a carer. And actually that it fills me, you know, it makes me quite emotional actually when I see a working practice that helps carers. I've been a carer for 30 years. You know, a working practice that facilitates the life of carers, doesn't discriminate against them, because actually the working culture we have in this country discriminates hideously against carers, and actually it discriminates hideously against people with disability. And actually what we've created here is a system, a structure and a culture that actually, you know, is showing signs of, you know, delivering benefits. And actually that's in our interest, because it actually means we are now fishing from a bigger pool of potential employees, because we have a structure that works for them. So that was a surprise actually, that it was, you know, it worked so well for these traditionally disadvantaged groups. So I think, you know, it's nice that you've picked out those very nice quotes. You know, they are in the supplementary appendices for that very reason that I started off with, that this needs to be a pretty tough report of hard data. But thank you for pulling those out. And certainly, you know, back in the day, we as members were very, very greedy of our colleagues' time, and I'd sit in meetings with, 20 members of staff there just because I might need them for 2 minutes. Now, they're called in for the 2 minutes we need them on Teams, and then they get back to work. So, some of it's simple, some of it's much more complex.
Councillor Stobart.
Chair, and lead, through you, Chair, thank you, Leader, for the comment. I completely agree. I think the report could be simply based on the KPIs to prove the point. So hard numerical data is you can't argue with the numbers. However, I think it would be nice to see the cultural aspects in some way emphasised and remembered, because I think other people will want to learn from what we've done here, and we need a story to tell. And if we don't write it down and we don't talk about it, then we will forget it. And I think it's enormously valuable to our colleagues that we recall it. And we recall it well, but we recall the human as well as the numerical side. So I agree, Leader, and but put more emphasis on the softer stuff.
Thank you very much, Councillor Stobart. Councillor Leeming.
Thank you, Chair. There is another thing that I wondered whether could be included in this cover report. So when reviewing scrutiny of the 4-day week, there's a significant piece of extended scrutiny that isn't noted here in this report in detail. In November 23, the previous national government issued South Cambs with a best value notice, and under this regime we had to provide reports to the Ministry of Housing and Communities and Local Government. How much data was provided, on what range of subjects, and what was the judgment on this data from a national government that was politically opposed to the 4-day week?
Councillor Bridget Smith. So, yeah, Councillor Leeming, you wanting to see more of that data in the report than we have currently?
Okay. Okay. Oh gosh, bad enough at 300 and something pages, isn't it? That wanting. So I think we submitted just shy of 180 pieces of data every single week for, I believe, a 12-month period under the best value notice, until the best value notice wasn't renewed just after the last general election. So we submitted it all. To the best of my knowledge, we had no feedback on it at all. If you want a value judgment from me, if there'd been anything in it of any concern whatsoever, I think we probably would have heard about it pretty quickly. But we had no feedback. I believe we made, and I'm just looking at officers here, I believe we made all that data publicly available on our website, so anybody who was interested could interrogate that 180 pieces of data if they didn't have anything better to do. But a lot of that data, I think there was data they were asking for which wasn't data that actually was pertinent to the trial we were running. There was some weird stuff actually, they asked for data which didn't actually exist in reality, or which was kind of meaningless. I think they wanted, was it weekly returns on business rates? And I think those are done annually, but they wanted weekly data. So some of it was a bit of nonsense. On top of which, I think there was some sort of telephone survey carried out rather strangely in South Cambridgeshire about it as well, which actually we submitted, I think, 3 FOI requests, and actually it did come from government, we found out at the end of the day, but we never had any feedback on that either.
Okay, but the data is available.
All on the website.
Yeah. Councillor Leeming.
Thank you. So there was a lot of data provided to the Ministry of Housing, Communities and Local Government, but they didn't pick anything out of it. Okay, I think it's perhaps worth saying that, because that was a lot of information that was provided consistently for an extremely long time.
I think it does allude to that in the report. Yeah.
I think that needs mentioning in the report.
It is mentioned in the report.
Yeah.
There's a sense in the report. I think also importantly that all that cost money, and and for the government to basically be taking on South Cambs actually cost the government money. They had to employ people to analyse all that data. So, you know, what a waste of taxpayers' money.
Okay. Councillor Lehman.
Thank you. Perhaps just a brief mention of that in here, that there was that additional external scrutiny that was pretty full on for a long period of time.
So yeah, clearly noting that essentially in the scrutiny documents. Lovely. Okay, I'm going to have a question. Let me refer to my scrappy notes. I was going to ask about agency staff, and has this council used agency staff over the period of the 4-day working week trial? Councillor John Williams.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yes, we do use agency staff because there are there's some work that has to be done in a short period of time for which we wouldn't want to permanently employ someone for. So yes, we do. I mean, Ukrainians, you know, helping Ukrainians come in here is one obvious. There are other things that we have done on a short-term basis, and we don't recruit people permanently for doing those jobs. We employ, but what's more important is that for the sort of fundamental jobs of this council, such as in planning and waste, we ought to be recruiting people on a full-time basis, on a permanent basis, to do that work. And what has happened, as you can see from the report, is that we have managed to overcome the retention and recruitment issues that we've had in the past. And actually, it's very interesting. I was looking up a staff in the employment committee back in 2019 to get a feel for how far things had improved. And back then, it was really serious. We just couldn't get people to actually apply for the jobs that we were advertising. And we actually set up a task and finish group to look at that problem. It was so serious. And now we find ourselves in a situation where we have, you know, for most jobs, more than enough applicants to enable us to choose the best, you know, we can. So there has been a fundamental shift in recruitment and retention. And that's, I remind you, that is the main purpose of why we brought a trial in the first place, because we thought that would be a way of overcoming that very serious issue.
Thank you for that. I get the gist on that. So really my point was in paragraph 10, page 7, we have we say in that paragraph it was possible to stop using agency workers to cover posts the council wanted to appoint to permanently, and I accept that you've said that, but I think that could be misread by the public as that we've stopped using agency staff, and I don't think that's very clear, because clearly we haven't stopped using agency staff. And what I would like to see as a supplement to that is how much are we spending on agency staff each and every year during the 4-day working week trial, so people can make, and that may be more or that may be less that we're spending each year, but I think those figures should be transparent within this report so the public and councillors can decide, are we spending more, less or in different amounts on agency staff. I don't think we should single out certain agency roles. I think that should be made clear within this document.
Yeah, quite happy to do that. It's around about 2 million, and it has been, you know, throughout the trial.
Okay, so my recommendation is that that is added to this report so full council can see that as we go forward, to see those it decreases or increases as we go forward. I'll have one more if that's okay.
Yes, Chair, that's okay.
Thank you. And the other thing that I didn't see in the report was, had there been staff increases during the 4-day working week trial? So the only place in the report that I could see that alluded to was sort of page, I think it was 318, 19, where it talks about an increased amount of people accessing the survey, so sort of suggesting that there's more staff later on. But actually, I think if we're saying that we've decreased working hours by X percent, it would be around about 13 odd percent. I would also like to see how many additional staff we've recruited over the 4-day working week trial period. Has that gone down? Has it stayed the same? Has it gone up year on year? Because that might be interesting both to councillors and the public, because if there's been an increase of around 13% in staff at the same time as we cut 13% of working hours thereabouts, people may draw conclusions from that for or against the 4-day working week trial. So I didn't feel that was explicit within the report. Councillor Bridget Smith. Councillor John Williams.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, there has been an increase in the number of employees.
But we don't know because it's not in the report.
The increase is due in part because, as you know, we have been using the increase in productivity to do more things, to spend money elsewhere that we would have otherwise have saved. So, for example, we've had an increase in apprenticeships. We've had 15 more posts in planning that are
That's
supported
absolutely
by
fine. I
income.
just think it should be clear within the report.
We have, there are other growth areas because obviously we're an area of growth. So we've got an expanding population. So we've had
I
to
accept
increase.
there might be more or less for
there
various
are,
reasons.
There has been an increase in the number of employees.
Okay, that's not clear from this report, in my view.
Well,
yeah,
okay, well, we'll take that away.
Yeah,
and
and I
make
think
that
it
clear.
should be prior to Thursday. I'll leave it there, I think. Yeah, so, Councillor Paul Beck.
Thank you, Chair. One of the criticisms that's often levelled against the 4-day working week is that if you can improve efficiency and productivity through a 4-day working week, why can't you have the same efficiencies and productivity in 5 days? Now, I think it's implicit in this report as to why that is the case, particularly in the employee surveys relating to mental health, motivation, and employees. I think there's one more, which is employee commitment or employee engagement. I think what I would have liked to have seen in this report is kind of making that a bit more explicit as to why it is possible to do this and achieve those efficiencies and improvements in 5 days, but you couldn't achieve that in 4 days, and you couldn't achieve it in 5 days. I agree that perhaps this is somewhat subjective, but it's clearly explicit. I would have liked to have seen it more explicit.
Thank you for that. Councillor Bridget Smith.
Thank you very much. So there's some overlap with Councillor Leamy's question and Liz Watts's response. But if we go to page 24 and paragraph 93 and the first Robinson Cooper Health and Wellbeing Survey we did, which rated physical health as caution and mental health as level as at risk. You know, that was really, really worrying. Our staff had poor mental health and their physical health was, was categorised as caution as well. So, we know that it's not rocket science to realise that if people are feeling good mentally and physically, actually they're going to be more productive and they're going to be able to work better. We've seen a 16% increase in health generally, 17% increase in positive mental health. Now, I've been quite stressed this last couple of weeks, which has made work difficult, actually. I'm not as efficient when I'm stressed. So, you know, I think we all feel that. You know, people's, I'm just trying to think how to say this. So that, what that translates into is people who are motivated. They feel valued, as Liz Watts has said, and they're therefore more committed to the organisation. So we've seen a 13% increase in commitment to the organisation. Now, if you're committed to an organisation, and I've worked in the health service, I've worked in education, I've worked in the third sector. You know, I know how important, you know, we have, you know, we have our chair in the health service and our vice chair in education. You know, both people really committed to the sector in which they work, and both, I'm sure, work really, really, really hard. But, you know, when one isn't in a good state and isn't feeling valued, actually it's very difficult to do that extra mile. And we know we do Going the Extra Mile awards for that very reason, because we acknowledge actually that these days those awards are quite tricky actually, because nearly everybody, if not everybody in this organisation is going the extra mile every single day. So it's difficult, you know, it's difficult to quantify, but I think this is a council full of highly intelligent people who I think, like yourself, are able to extrapolate that from the health and wellbeing data without us having to stray into writing a report where, you know, we're then accused of being too subjective about it. So, sorry, that was a bit of a woolly answer. I'm sorry about that.
It's okay.
Yeah, I just wanted to comment a bit more on the, obviously, the improvements in mental health and well-being. I think that's against the backdrop more nationally of what appears to be declining mental health and well-being, and we see that in the increasing numbers of people who are, you know, on sickness benefit. So, you know, this has got all sorts of wider implications and benefits.
Thank you for that. Councillor Tom Bygott, please.
Thank you, Chair. So I've got 3 questions related to the KPIs.
Okay, do them individually to give them a chance to respond.
Okay, fantastic. So page 61 of Appendix B, we've got figure 23, staff sickness days per full-time equivalent, excluding the shared waste service. So that graph has a constant red line target at 1.75. And it was some time ago, I think it was last year sometime, we had this discussion about whether a sick day under a 4-day week has the same value as a sick day on a 5-day week, because you're taking up 1.25 times as many of the total days that you work. And my recollection was that we had agreed that that was the case, and that therefore the target should be different. So I just, my question is, does that figure 23, that target of 1.75, take into account the difference in severity from taking a sick day off under a 4-day week versus a 5-day week? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bygott.
Thank you. If Jeff Membry could, I think we've been through this at length, but perhaps if Jeff Membry could remind people like me what the answer was.
Jeff Membry.
Yes, we did discuss it, although the decision was not to change it. There are a number of reasons for that. We use the standard definition, and the standard definition for this indicator is very broadly drawn anyway. So actually, a day's sickness, if somebody just works 2 hours a day, and they're sick that day, that counts as 1 day, even if it's 2 hours. People might, for example, work 37 hours over 4 days, and again, if they're sick for 1 day, that's counted as 1 day sickness. There was then that question about, well, if we were to change it, first of all, it'd be difficult to do comparisons with what happened pre and post the trial, and exactly what change would we make? You talked about, what, 25% extra there because we're working 1 less day, but actually people are working 13.5% less time. So if we were to just make a change and it would go up, I can see I'm being hurried by the chair, so I'll come to a conclusion.
I think
the decision was not to change it so that we've
Yeah,
got consistency
I
and
understand.
members can interpret it themselves.
Thank you for that. You want a point of clarification on this?
Yeah, please, if I could just clarify something this member just said. You just said about doing 37 hours in 4 days. That would suggest compressed hours. Are there members of staff doing compressed hours, or is it the normal model that we've been talked about all the way through? Because I felt that that was a slight variation to what we've been told in the past.
Membry.
Yeah, now I was giving examples of the range of what counts as 1 day under this classification, because it's a national classification, it's very broadly drawn. So people could be working compressed hours, they could be working shorter hours, but if they have 1 day sick, it counts as 1 day, no matter how many hours that was going to be. So it gives us consistency with other organisations.
Councillor Heather Williams.
So to be clear, what you're saying is other places, not here. Nobody here is on compressed hours. And just this is on FTE. So I don't quite understand why the different working hours for people that are like part-time or do 2 hours when this is based on full-time equivalents. Those calculations had already been factored in.
Jeff Membry.
Indeed, we've consistently continued to use 37 hours, even though people now work 32. For example, if we were to reduce it to 32 hours, that would mean that we would count as having more FTEs and sickness would artificially drop because of the number of FTEs increasing. So what we're doing is being consistent in how we're interpreting this so that members who do have very different views on what they expect from a change in the sickness KPI can interpret it themselves.
Thank you for that clarification. Councillor Bygott.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, so that was a clear answer. So my next question relates to another topic that I've raised over the various scrutiny meetings. And that's so on page 32 of Appendix B and page 37 of Appendix B.
Shall I translate? That's page 79 on our agendas. If it would help, I'm quite happy to look over Councillor Bygott's shoulders.
Yeah, that's fine. I'm reading the small numbers because I'm actually looking at Thursdays because most of it's the same. And I'll look on paper.
Page 79. On tonight's papers. Yeah, I have tonight's. Tom's just ahead of the game as normal.
Yeah. No, there weren't enough paper copies, so just easier on paper.
Your question, Councillor Bygott.
Yeah, so we talked about seasonal adjustment, and we actually changed some of the KPIs in the last KPI report we had, because when you do the seasonal adjustment, you don't have to have that sawtooth pattern, and you can actually see the trends more clearly. So I was just wondering why, if we'd made that decision for the KPIs that we review as scrutiny, why the report doesn't have that as a feature. So that's my second question.
Okay, Councillor Bridget Smith.
So the recent work on the KPIs is occurred after the final analysis was done. So there's complete consistency in the KPIs that have been measured the whole way through the trial, and changes to the KPIs have come in after we ended the trial.
Okay, I think that's clear. Councillor Bygott.
Yes, that's reasonable. So my third question relates to page 21 and page 28.
Councillor Bygott, can you switch your mic on, please? Lovely.
Oh, do you want me to say that again? Or?
Yeah, please, on the mic.
Yeah, so my next question relates to the graphs on page 21 of Appendix B.
That's page 68.
And page 28 of Appendix B.
It's page 75.
And
I'm your translator.
so it's a very useful service to have. So both of these graphs relate to the contact centre, and what you'll see is a feature from that is that there are 3 very, very large drops in percentage of calls that are answered on a monthly basis, and then the second of those graphs is kind of the reverse image of that, because it's the average call answer time in seconds, and that sort of peaks three very extreme ways. So my first sub-question is, what is the cause of those peaks? And then if it's a feature of a call centre that there are going to be times when you have very extreme peaks of calls coming in, does that mean that our call centre is adequately sized, predicting those events before they happen?
Okay. Jeff Membry, did you want to come in on that?
Yes, I'm afraid I don't recall off the top of my head what caused some of these peaks. But we do, after every month, look at what's happened in the contact centre, look at what the performance was, and analyse the reasons if performance falls off. I think the contact centre is adequately staffed. The difficulty we have is a lot of people move on from the contact centre to other roles within the authority, so we've constantly got a churn of new people. So we're adapting to that. Now, I'm not saying that's what caused these falling off in answer times, because I'll need to go in, find that out, and get that information for you.
Thank you for that. Councillor Bygott.
Yeah, so I guess there are sort of two possible causes for that kind of thing. One is an internal thing in terms of how our team responded to a constant flow of calls, and that could relate to new staff or various other things. The other is there were certain things that happened at that time, external things, that caused a great increase in the number of people calling us. But my second part of that question, which hasn't been answered yet, is really to do with adequate sizing of the call centre, and do we take into account that there will be external times when for some reason there is a spike in calls, and when you size a call centre, you need to take into account those external times, even if it means that you've got people sitting around not answering quite so many calls, if there's not an external reason. Thank you.
Councillor Bridget Smith.
Thank you. So good question. So the most recent peak we discussed at some length in our informal cabinet meeting, because we were concerned about it as well. And as you say, as everybody knows, we get huge peaks in calls to the contact centre, particularly when council tax forms go out and so on. And I think we still have some work to do in bringing people in from other parts of the organisation to cover those. My recollection, and forgive me if I got it slightly wrong, of what happened most recently was I think we had some sickness, I think we had some holidays, I think that it was the I think we had a new system coming in. We have been socialising the new AI system. So I think there was just a kind of convergence of a number of factors, some of which were outside of our control. We've obviously been trying for a number of years now to move people over to online communications and away from telephones where possible. We're seeing some very positive things coming out of, I think it's Sam, isn't it, our new sort of AI bot, and I believe customer satisfaction is very high when the call's answered by Sam, who I gather can answer 60 calls at any one time, whereas you or I can only answer one at a time. So I think it is still a work in process. But I think what we're seeing from that graph is that these peaks are getting less frequent. But certainly, Jeff is absolutely onto this, and so I can't say we'll never see peaks again, but I hope that it will continue to be less frequent, and I hope they'll be less peaky.
Councillor Bygott.
Thanks very much. So just to clarify, we're not really expecting this sort of thing to happen in the future.
I think that's what I gathered from your response.
We're hoping, and we are working towards it.
Thank you. Lovely. Councillor Hobro, please.
Thank you, Chair. So I had a question about the differences in the kinds of service that we provide, and how the 4-day week is working, sort of the mechanics of it, how that works across those different services. So we provide at least two quite different kinds of services to residents and businesses. And I'm thinking, I suppose, of office-based services and waste collection. You know, they're very different in the way that they operate in all sorts of ways. And I mean, based on the discussions that we've had about KPIs, we've been looking at the improvements in the planning service. I'm beginning to understand how the mechanics of the 4-day week is bringing the win-win benefits that we're seeing in office-based work, especially with this movement from the reliance on agency staff to well-motivated permanent employees. I can also see clearly how the 4-day cycle for bin collection has clear benefits for residents because it removes the disruption that we used to have over bank holidays. At the same time, I can see how quickly our bin collection crew works. You know, they move at lightning speed. It seems pretty clear that they can't speed up. So I do find it harder to see intuitively how we've achieved the cost reductions and service quality improvements in the waste collection service, as well as in the office-based work. So what I'm asking for really is some comments on how the mechanics of the 4-day week has worked in these two very different working scenarios in terms of its benefits and how they're achieved, and to ensure that we're comfortable that the benefits to service quality and employee well-being do indeed apply to both of those scenarios.
So almost a statement about quality in the report, which is...
Yeah, a kind of explanation of the way it fits together in these very different working scenarios.
Councillor Bridget Smith.
Thank you. So I'll start off, and then if I could ask Bode Esam to come in, please, on the kind of...
You may, yeah.
The detail. So I went up to Waterbeach at the point at which all the desk staff had started on the trial, and we hadn't yet done all that route optimisation to allow the waste service. And there were some quite grumpy people up there going, you know, we want to start this. You know, why can't we do it now? So we had a good chat and explained why. So they were very, very keen to start it. And I think, you know, the benefits we've seen there have been, you know, the reasons are the same as for the desk-bound staff. It's about, you know, people having a quality of life that they didn't have before, them feeling valued. Liz referred to social exchange theories. You know, we're giving them something, and in exchange, they're giving us their commitment and their really hard work back. Now, I'm sure that Bode will talk about how, you know, they've done a terribly slick job on the route optimisation and so on. But you're quite right. People can't run faster than they do run. So, you know, there's other factors there. But I think, you know, the reasons it's worked with desk-based staff are exactly the same reasons it works with operational staff. But if Bode could add some detail.
Bode, I can see you're ready to come in there.
Thank you very much, Chair. And through you, I think Councillor Bridget Smith has already said everything I wish to say. It's just that we've offered our colleagues a social contract. There is no doubt at all that they work smarter, they work harder. They definitely collect several hundred more bins every day, and they also walk a few miles extra every day. But in return, they get a 3-day weekend, and they're willing to do that. And the results show that as well. We don't have a drop in the number of misfits. If anything, it is steady or slightly better. So I think it's that social contract. In return for getting a 3-day weekend, they're willing to work harder and also work smarter. The rounds are much more compact, they're much more efficient, but definitely they are working, they're putting in a lot more effort under the 4-day week.
Thank you for that. Councillor James Howbrow.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, they're very clear answers. And it's really good to hear how the mechanics of this works. And I think the report is really about, you know, data that's showing whether or not this works. But I think it's extremely helpful also to understand what's going on and why it is that we're getting these benefits. So thank you.
Thank you. I think that's been noted. Councillor Heather Williams.
Thank you, Chair. I've been uncharacteristically patient, so I'm hoping you'll bear with me as I go through a couple of things. I'll start with some very small things which I think might be sort of easier to take on board. Throughout the report, I'm just going to flag one scenario, but I think it'd be worth reading through the report ahead of full council. Things like on page 9, paragraph 22, on the last sentence, it says intensity was slightly higher when compared with other organisations. So words like slightly are very subjective to the author. So I think the actual figures in there would help to give that air of sort of be more helpful in discussing
Let's just take that first. So certainty around the word and the figures to back that up. Councillor Bridget Smith.
So, sorry, I'm trying to find this. So you're saying page 9, you said 20...
Page 9 on the papers, paragraph 22.
So
if you work sort of backwards, if you're looking at the right-hand side, on the last line of that paragraph on the right-hand side, it says slightly.
Intention to leave was slightly higher
Slightly.
when compared to...
What I'm saying is things like that are quite subjective, so that's someone's judgment. So it'd be good if we could actually have the figure. And there's another example, Chair, on the next page, on paragraph 28, it says that employees have been able to choose not to take part or can opt out, etc. But I think a helpful thing would be the sort of scale to see if it's 1 or 2 people, is it 10, 20, whatever it may be. So I think some figures give it context.
Brilliant. Councillor Bridget Smith, can we take that on board?
Okay, so, right, so in relation to the first point in 22, I think, so that's the benchmarking. That's the benchmarking that's been done by Robinson Cooper, and I think, is that not all in the appendices? Is that? Okay, so I think that bench.
My point is about having it.
You'd like it in the cover report,
and things
okay.
like the opt-out.
What does do we mean
lots
by
of sort of referring off,
okay,
and a lot of cross-casting you sort of have to do.
Point taken, and then 28 was the other one. Sorry, I'm getting
26, leader.
It
says that some have opted out,
okay.
having some figures.
Was it 4?
Well,
John?
4 people. Sorry, 4 colleagues have opted out, but none are in the waste, and this paragraph relates to waste. So no one in waste has opted out, but 4 colleagues, desk-based staff, have opted out.
So I think some clarity around this, and also things like when discussing the trial in paragraph 3, it says about the 100 and the 80 and the 100, but obviously that's desk-based staff. In places, it's not clear that it's desk-based that went ahead of the waste crews, because then, of course, it changed to 32 hours, etc. So I just think there are some things like that require tightening up to make sure that the document is as accessible as possible. Which I think the.
So I think it is all there, Councillor Williams. But we've already had a request for a timeline, and I think that might, it is a really complicated report, and I've read it quite a lot of times, and so I accept it's a really complicated report with an awful lot in there. I can't tell you how many iterations it's been through. So it is a whole lot simpler than in its first iteration. Trust me. But I appreciate what you're saying.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. The other point I have is in sort of relation to process changes, which I think is in part been picked up by Councillor Leeming and Councillor Hobro. I think what would be really helpful, and you can see it with the KPIs, you know how we have the KPIs and a bit of commentary, and I think it'd be very helpful. We have lists of sort of the process changes that have gone in during the trial, to just help give us that context as to what has impacted that KPI, because as the analysis shows, there are other factors at play. So I just, if you look at page 6 as an example, you have things like percentage of emergency housing repairs in 24 hours. Is that because of us, or perhaps we've got a new contract that has different terms with contractors? We've got things like disputed invoices being paid within 30 days. Is that just led by employees, or is there new software? We've mentioned earlier about the introduction of AI. So just being able to see on each KPI where the variables might be, because as the report says, it's not solely down to, it said actually can't rely on it as per the 4-day week evidence, but I think it would help us to see that context of other changes in that time, so then we as members on Thursday can make a judgment individually as to whether we think it's because of 4-day week or is it because of process changes in that department, which is reflected. So I suppose that's probably the most substantial change.
Let's take that now. Councillor Bridget Smith.
So we started off with Councillor Drew asking us to do something that's impossible to do, and you're essentially asking us to do something that's impossible.
I have it, Leader, if you wanted.
Well, so if I could just explain. So, you know, because of the 4-day week, because we have permanent staff, because we have well-rested, happy, healthy, well-motivated and committed staff, we have been able to progress with an awful lot of other, changes and improvements, and particularly if we think of the transformation programme we had in planning that was completely stalled. Because there's been this cultural change and this, this very, very significant change in how people work and how people view their work and value their work and are valued by their work, it has therefore allowed consequentially an awful lot of other things to be put in place, which I would argue strongly if we'd still, if we hadn't done this, things would still be stalled and we wouldn't be, we may well be seeing decline rather than improvement. So I'm sure, there are, when we look at the KPIs now, I'm sure there are other factors that are coming into play, but it's because of the 4-day week that those other factors have been able to come into play. That's what
Thank you for that. I think that's clear. So for transparency reasons, could we have a list of those other good things that the council have been done as a supplement to this document, so as that either councillors or the public can draw their own conclusions? Is it the 4-day working week, or is it that we've looked at it? Well, we don't know, and that's clear from this report, but I think in terms of transparency, we should have that list so councillors can draw their own conclusions. Councillor Heather Williams, have I interrupted inappropriately there? But yeah.
Not inappropriately, Chair. No, you've grasped it. At the end
That's
of the
what
day,
you were getting.
Yeah, we were given, or I was given a list of 156 process changes over a short period, and they are quite easily mappable. So if need be, I'm quite happy to do that work myself for the report if it was required. I did colouring in on maps the other day. But I think it is important because it is down to us all to make a judgment, but the only report we've got on KPIs says that it cannot be relied on to judge the 4-day week. So in that case, we need some more information to make our own judgment.
Point noted. I think Councillor Bridget Smith, do you want to...
So the report doesn't say it can't be relied upon. What the report says is, there will be other factors that have come into play during the process of the trial. We're very happy to take this away and see what we can do. Yeah. But, we are in a fast-moving environment in local government. AI, massive game changer. We're an early adopter. We are leading the way. And, again, the question is, would we have been able to be an earlier adopter of AI if we'd had the old ways of working? And I don't think we can make that judgment. So some of this is going to be awfully subjective stuff, but we will take it away and we'll do our best.
Thank you for that. And I accept those points, Leader. I just think in terms of transparency, it would be nice to have the full list, whatever councillors want to do with that, or comparisons that they want to draw. Councillor Heather Williams, did you have any other points?
I do, just a couple. Yeah. Just a small one, that we've mentioned golden hellos and the other things. Golden handcuffs isn't mentioned in the report, but we know from earlier on that they are sometimes used, or the policy allows them to be used. So I just think that might be omission by mistake.
I'm sorry, I didn't understand.
Golden handcuffs.
Golden handcuffs. Oh gosh, I've got no idea. I'm going to have to ask Jeff Membry, if you may
We were talking about retention payments. Yeah, those are due to be phased out by the end of the year. Again, they're things that are put in with the review period, and you can't remove them during the review period, but they're due to be phased out.
Thank you. Councillor Heather Williams.
Thank you. So, substantially on page 29 of the report, it goes into costings. I just wanted to verify a few bits. I realise, Lydia, you need some support with this, might have to come after the meeting. So when we look at the line, which is net additional cost shared waste, I suppose this goes back to Councillor Howbury's point about the waste service. Obviously, we do have 2 extra crews while the trial's going on to help deal with that. When I looked at the sort of most recent adverts for loaders and drivers, I've made an assumption of 2 loaders to 1 driver. That figure appeared to just be the sort of basic salary costs. It didn't seem, and that's what it added up to. So can we have clarity? Just say net. So obviously there are pension costs as employers NI. There's lots of add-on costs to being an employer. So can we have those included? Because otherwise I don't think it's a fair assessment. The other point...
Let's just stop there.
Yeah.
Do you want me to bring Gareth Bell on this point? Or Bode, one of the two? I think Gareth Bell has indicated. Yeah? Yeah? Councillor John Williams, did you?
Sorry, I wasn't sure if your hand was up or you were waving your pen.
Fine. Gareth Bell.
Thank you, Chair. Just consulting with the Head of Finance there, that the table does include the NI and pension costs, so the net is representative, if that makes sense.
Thank you. Councillor Heather Williams.
Yes, because when I went on the recent website, we were advertising in our brackets up to 29,876 salary for a driver, 26,532 for a loader. So 2 loaders and a driver comes to 82,940. So you cannot, that was just the salary cost on the advert. So you'd expect the pension to not be included in the salary cost. So I think maybe if we could have that just double checked and verified and take that away, Leader, ahead of the meeting, because that's not consistent with the latest advert that went out. The other thing, which I know it means a lot to many members of the administration, is the move to electric as opposed to diesel lorries. Nobody wants to see additional diesel lorries on the road. The prices here for the 2 additional vehicles that are required are based on diesel, not electric. And I reference that because previously we've been told that the view is to sort of replace diesel with electric as it goes on. But again, that would be about £25,000 per authority more if that was to happen. So could we please have a breakdown with diesel, with electric, so we can make informed decision processes? I have one more on this page, Chair. Would you like to stop there?
I would, yeah. Bode, I was going to bring you in there on the costings in the document, diesel versus electric.
Thank you, Chair. Just to confirm, at present, the plan for the service is to decarbonize part of the fleet. We do not have funding from either of the councils to decarbonize beyond 18 electric vehicles. That's already budgeted, it's already funded. We have a fleet of a total of 54 vehicles. So these costs are not based on electric vehicles because we don't plan to decarbonize the entire fleet at all. 2 reasons. One, we don't have the funding, but also technology may change in the future and electric may not be the only game in town. So we're not planning on decarbonizing the entire fleet with electric vehicles.
Councillor Heather Williams.
So, Chair, perhaps as we do on other things, we ought to have, as part of this analysis, the carbon impact of putting 2 more additional diesel bin lorries onto our roads. That's something that in other decision-making processes is looked at, and so for consistency it should be here. Also, it references future service changes. I can understand none of us know exactly what's going to happen in the future, but we do know that separate food waste collections are coming. And we also know there has been some initial works done to the costings of that and the difference it is between 5 and 4 days. So you might want to just make it clear it's provisional, but surely there should be some consideration to the costs of doing a 4-day week on that.
Councillor Bridget Smith.
Okay, so we know that weekly food collection is coming. There's still a huge amount of uncertainty, and we still don't know what's going to be funded by government as new burdens funding. So, you know, massive unknowns there. We do know that with a 4-day week, we'll need 2 further bin lorries in order to run the services. But we also know that every other local authority in the country who are also going to have to take on this new burden are going to be trying to recruit HGV drivers. And therefore, you know, they are going to struggle. Certainly the councils, which I know fairly well, around HS2 have really struggled because HS2 pays £25 an hour and we're not paying that. So, you know, there's already a tremendous undersupply. So, you know, we on our 4-day week, and we've heard from Bode about what a happy workforce there is up in Waterbeach, we immediately have a market advantage when it comes to this.
Councillor Heather Williams.
I think it's important that we know, yes, there are variables, but we need to know the full cost of this policy if it was enacted, which with this current clause, if it was something that come up in the future that none of us had foreseen, then absolutely fine. But there is recognition here that there's going to be an additional cost. And yet, so I think if it's possible, we do know there are some sort of initial calculations on this that all members should be privy to it. I have one other point, Chair.
Councillor Heather Williams, I'm just going to bring in Natalie Warren-Green very quickly on this point because she's indicating to speak on this point.
Oh, sorry, it's going a bit dark in that room I'm in. Apologies for not being there today. I did intend to come. Unfortunately, I've had to come away to look after a sick relative.
Thank you.
I just wanted to mention on the point about the costings being done. Bodie has done a tremendous amount of work on the cost of service. Whether or not we do a 4 or 5 day week as we introduce the food service, and I'm sure that could be made available to you. The detail on it will take us kind of well over time on this, but I'm sure the detail could be made available because, you know, the work is being done and has been done. And I can see we've got D Wood on here as well as Bode. And I'm sure they would vouch the fact that that could be made available as requested.
I think we'll take you up on that offer. Councillor Heather Williams.
Definitely, thank you very much. So one other thing that is referred to in various parts of the agenda, and just one thing before I hit my last question. Earlier on, the leader and I have known each other for many years now, and we don't agree on many things, but I think we understand each other well enough to know and to flesh out. There was something that was mentioned earlier which caught my eye, and I do not believe it would have been meant in the way the leader said it, but she referenced about recruitment and having a better quality of applicant. That has a double-edged sword. It sort of implies that people that were already here are not as good quality. I think I know the leader well enough to know that would not have been what she meant, but would invite her to clarify that because it has sort of been interpreted both ways. And then I've got my last point, Chair.
Would you like to clarify that?
Willingly. So we only appoint better calibre of applicants.
Okay, thank you.
But we're getting more choice of those better calibre of applicants. So they are joining a high calibre team already here.
Thank you for that.
The leader would appreciate sort of redefining that answer. So on my last bit for today, the productivity policy is referred to on page 26. And it says about a commitment to maintaining increased productivity, but also the options are temporary change, and yet the options later on say permanent change. So we have this sort of contradiction to permanence and temporary that I feel that could be done with some explanation. But also, I think we should see the productivity policy, even if it was in draft form, as to how, roughly whereabouts it would land before making such a decision. So can examples or a draft be made available so that when a decision is made on Thursday, people have a very clear view of the checks and balances? Because without that, I I think you wouldn't really be, nobody would sort of say, let's make this decision and figure out how we do it, make it work later. Do you know what I mean? We're meant to be data-led, and I know the leader's always proud of being data-led. So can we see a productivity policy, please?
Councillor Bridget Smith. Councillor John Williams.
I'll answer this. Well, no, you can't, because we need to wait for council to make the decision whether or not we should be recommending to staffing and employment that we should adopt a productivity policy, and it will be for staffing and employment to consider the actual detail of that. But you've got to remember that what we're doing here is formalising the trial. So what we're doing here is enabling staff to opt in to a productivity policy to enable them to continue post-trial with the 32-hour week with the rest day. The productivity policy, the actual detail of the productivity policy, will be worked out by staff and employment and in negotiation with the trade unions.
Councillor Heather Williams.
So I even asked for just examples and things like that, if that could be included, because at the moment there are various options. To have a productivity policy is an option that's in this report, and it is referred to as the recommended option. But this seems to be an important crux as to how it can actually work in practice. We still have the sort of debate. One side it says temporary, other side says permanent. I think before making a decision, it's important to understand, of a permanent decision, it's important to understand how that process would work from start to end. Not, okay, it's been okay so far, so we'll give it a go, and then we'll work out how we recall it later on. Because actually, somebody may look at the productivity policy and say, I'm happy with those safeguards in place to vote for it. They may say, that is not adequate safeguards to vote for it. So to have a lack of this and defer it to much later on, surely is a very concerning oversight.
Thank you for that. Councillor Bridget Smith.
Thank you very much. So, what we've done is we've set out here very carefully the parameters for the policy at 103 on page 26. And this will then go to the Employment Staffing Committee. Nobody's talked about the unions so far. The unions are absolutely key in this. And we've taken huge pains to work very, very closely with them. And I thank them publicly for all the work they've done with us and for their support. So the parameters are that this has to be an opt-in for everybody. So people are signing up to join the 4-day week working practice. We cannot hamstring whatever a council, South Cambridgeshire District Council, becomes as a result of LGR. We've got to give that new entity full freedom to do what's right and proper for them. And then the third point is about preventing people. People are still, they've got to still be available for employment for those 5 days, because we're not changing that. And they therefore can't go and take a second job during those working hours, which is something that's been debated at length in all the previous meetings. Obviously, a very important point to have nailed down. So that's the parameters. So I think it's reasonably simple actually, but there'll be another bite of this cherry through employment and staffing, and then I imagine it's probably coming back to cabinet thereafter, or does it get signed off by employment and staffing? Okay, fine. Okay, well, another bite of the cherry there.
Councillor Heather Williams, last point, please.
Yeah. Obviously, this is not the preferable outcome. Normally, you would see something before you're sort of voting through it. Reference was made to unions, but it is also, and it says in here colleagues, but it's really important about residents. It's not just what works for the unions, it's got to work for residents and us as elected members being able to be part of that conversation. So I would hope that it wouldn't just be them that would be consulted, because at the moment it's being put down. You may laugh, Councillor John Williams, but people do care. I know it was said earlier on people don't care, but people do. Lots of people took the time to fill in this survey. We as councillors have spent the time to go through the documents. It's not a laughing matter, it's really important to people. And at the end of the day, these here are the safeguards. This policy is possibly one of the most important parts of this decision, because it's the safeguards for what happens if something goes wrong. And that is fundamentally important to actually mark the success and judgment of whatever our views may be on this process. It should be all councillors, and I would like to understand and some reasoning in here as to why it is going to staffing and employment committee, which is just a very small proportion of councillors. And it should, can we have a commitment, unlike this report originally, that report will go through scrutiny and be scrutinised by as many people as possible in this council to ensure that as many residents have voices.
Councillor Williams, I think you've made your point clear. Councillor Bridget Smith.
So it's late and we're getting tired. We've just run a very, very complex and extensive consultation. So we have a pretty good idea about what people think, and there was quite a lot of narrative, voluntarily submitted narrative in that. So I am quite content that we've got to this stage. We will take a decision on Thursday. If the decision on Thursday is that we therefore submit a draft productivity policy to employment and staffing, I am very comfortable that that is the right way for this to proceed. No, I don't think it needs to go back to residents, because actually, we saw a sort of 0.3 response rate to a consultation on something which has had an awful lot of publicity. Consulting on South Cambridgeshire's productivity policy, I think would cost us a lot of money, and actually, very few people would actually be interested. This is about, people care about their bins being collected, and so on.
I think I've heard both points very, very briefly, so I want to move on to the next speaker.
I did not propose consulting with residents as is previously happening. I said to consult all councillors, so they are represented.
Okay, I think the leader has heard that, and yeah, I think we'll move on. Thank you to Councillor Stephen Drew.
It is 19 minutes past 9. I think I will defer my need to speak.
Okay, fair enough. Right, so I think we have come to the end of the list of speakers. So we have noted where we've made recommendations as we've gone along, and I thank Simon for keeping up to date with that, which hasn't been easy. So I think we've done what we've been asked to do. We've commented on the report. We've made some recommendations. The leader and the head of finance, Councillor John Williams, have answered those questions, and I thank them for sitting through a couple of hours on this agenda item. So we'll move on to the next agenda item, which is to note...
Could I just thank you for a really excellently chaired meeting, and for all colleagues in the room here for very, very useful submissions and questions. So thank you, very well chaired.
Number 5 is to note the date of the next meeting, which I believe is the 11th of September. Yeah. Thank you for that, and thank you for going through that process. Thank you all.
Thank you, Chair.